This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
All right, how's it going, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On this episode, recapping a huge primary day for the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, with three victorious candidates, Jeanine Calkin, Tiara Mack, and Brandon Potter. All right, first of all, a shout out to all of you who are following along on primary day. I was running around tweeting, live streaming, the whole deal, and a bit of a preview to how I'm going to cover this coming general election in November. So a lot of fun, and thanks for all the feedback. It was really interesting to be on the ground at some of the polling places. And obviously I've done this in previous elections, but this year, given the pandemic, given a lot of the uncertainty about turnout, given the amount of mail-in ballots, given the fact that the emergency advanced ballots as well, wasn't really sure what it was going to feel like, but definitely felt the electricity, dare I say, of the election process taking place. So appreciate that. And if you're not already following along, Twitter at Bill Bartholomew, and you can join the Bartholomew Town Podcast Facebook group, or just go to btown.stream. That's how you get this live coverage going forward. So today's episode, we recorded it on Thursday, yesterday, around 3 o'clock, just before the Board of Elections released the final tally of votes, which included the emergency ballots, the mail-in ballots, and of course the in-person voting that we already had the data on going into today. So we're going to hear from Tiara Mack, who knocked off longtime conservative Democrat Senator Harold Metz in Senate District 6. Tiara Mack, who's been on this program several times, as recently, I think it was last week, right? We did the primary preview. Jeanine Calkin, who took back her seat in Senate District 30, and Brandon Potter, who won in HD 16 out in Cranston for his inaugural appearance in the General Assembly. And more than anything, I was just completely fascinated by the Rhode Island Political Co-op ever since they made their initial announcement. I think it was last August, it seems like, and just following the process along as this group has built an identity, yes, as a progressive faction unit sort of co-op, obviously, that's working to elect progressive candidates, but also presenting themselves as a viable alternative to the institutions of power here in the Ocean State. You look in East Providence, you see Cynthia Mendez knocking off Billy Connolly. That's going to affect the Finance Committee. You look around the state and you see not only in terms of those who won their races, but also you look at Lenny Seo and Jen Rourke, really tight races putting pressure on General Assembly leadership. So fascinating stuff here. It's been a conversation that I've been kind of having for well over a year, maybe 2 years, really trying to understand challenging the institutions of power here in the Ocean State in an apolitical context, right? Because there are Republicans out there who are saying, look, we've had enough of the status quo. There are progressives who are certainly saying that as well. And I think there are also moderates who would just like to see things shaken up. And I think that's how our system functions best, right? I don't know if you agree with that, but when things are shaken up, when new ideas are introduced, new human beings are put on the ground to execute those ideals, and frankly, when they reflect the will of the people. So that's what this episode's about. We're going to hear, as I said, from three candidates from the co-op. Throughout this election cycle, we'll hear from more candidates who were victorious. And I'm also going to recap with a few people who did not pull off victories, but again, put significant pressure on Senate leadership, House leadership. It's going to shift the dynamics of the conversation at minimum when the General Assembly reopens next year, and let's hope that actually happens, right? By the way, if you want to help to sustain the independent journalism, opinion, analysis, and entertainment that Bartholomew Town has become known for, the best way to do so is to become a B-Town Insider. Simply head to patreon.com/Bartholomew Town, and for as little as $3 a month, your contribution can help to grow this program here in the Ocean State and beyond. And by the way, if you become a B-Town Insider, you also receive exclusive monthly content. Last month, we had Ted Nesi and Ian Donis, Ted Nesi of WPRI, Ian Donis of the Public's Radio on, talking presidential election, their picks, their thoughts at this point in time. Only going to get that as a B-Town Insider. Look out. Something to consider, and thanks for all your support out there in general. Okay, let's get right to it. A conversation with Tiara Mack, Jeanine Calkin, and Brandon Potter, victorious in their respective races in the 2020 primary and members of the Rhode Island Political Co-op. The results that we discuss on this episode held up after the Board of Elections announced the final tallies a few hours after we recorded, so no big surprises. Let's get to the episode. Okay, so we're here. It's Thursday around, it's 3:02 Eastern Standard Time. We still don't have the complete body of results from the Board of Elections. They just tweeted out that they're counting. It'll be a little bit before we have the official certification by and large what happened. But we do know and can certainly draw some conclusions that, broadly speaking, this past Tuesday was at minimum a breakthrough for both, I guess, the overlapping progressive ideology and the Rhode Island Political Cooperative here in Rhode Island. So it's at minimum a broad success, I think, for everyone involved. So let's kind of get right into, first of all, your own specific experiences, and then let's touch on what Tuesday's results sort of say about maybe where we're heading and about, by and large, what folks are thinking about the institutions that are in charge of Rhode Island. Because I think my extrapolation is there's both push for a more progressive Rhode Island, but there's also a push for a shakeup of those who are in power. So let's start with someone who has appeared recently on the show, and I saw you like first thing in the morning. Well, not really first thing, relatively first thing in the morning, Tiara Mack, and your walloping of the conservative Democrat longtime Senator Harold Metz. And so it's kind of like after the Super Bowl. So what does it feel like to win your race? So what, I mean, again, it's not officially certified, but congratulations.
Yeah, I'm hesitantly optimistic, very conservative still.
Yeah.
The sound congratulations still doesn't resonate quite deeply in my soul, but it feels really good to have ended Tuesday with in-person voting looking the way it did, being at the polls and seeing the faces of folks who I'd knocked on their door. Amazing stories of people who literally said they were only there for me, to vote for me. I had someone who I wasn't there at one of the polling locations first thing in the morning, but this older man walked from his house on Ocean Street to the polling place and said, "Estoy aquí solamente para Tiara." And I'm like, that is what you want to hear. I also had one of the reps in my district say that she had never spoken so much Spanish at the polling places. Like, we had activated a new base of people who had come out for the first time. Even just looking at the numbers now, more people had voted, some first-time voters or people who'd been so disengaged for a long time. And I think that's what I'm the proudest of, that was kind of like the feeling of Tuesday, like seeing all my old friends again at the polling places.
Yeah, it did have that sort of feel. I know when I was out and about, just going around different polling locations and seeing people that I haven't seen like since last year, realistically. And, and then also seeing a lot of people who gave off the appearance that, hey, maybe this is their first time voting in a primary. And just asking a lot of questions, not someone who just marched right in and kind of knew the drill. So that's really fascinating. Brandon, on your end, kind of summing up your experience.
Yeah, similar to what Tiara said. I mean, obviously this was my first time running for office, so I don't have a whole lot to compare it to, but a lot of just visual at the polls presence and positive feedback from people, whether they were giving thumbs up or, people were making comments that was a race that they actually came out for. That was really, really impactful, considering that, we had the mayoral race and the city council race too. So I think, people really recognize the messaging, and they recognize the need for change, and seeing people actually be engaged enough and active enough to make it a point to go out and make that change happen at the voting locations in person was just really, really humbling.
Jeanine, your take, same question.
Yeah, so this is my third time running, so it's been through it a couple of times already, and but the excitement and the energy that we have with talking to people, it just seems like so many people are aware of what's going on. They're paying attention. They're more excited this year to get out and vote. We focused a lot on mail ballots, so we're hopeful to see how those end up turning out. But I think the people that we have been talking to, and I think, Tiara and Brandon have experienced this as well. they're ready for change. They're ready to shake things up. And they're looking for, representation from people who are really going to fight for them. So hearing those experiences, talking to people and, seeing that it's also replicated in Brandon and Tiara's races as well. I think it's great.
Let's go. Oh, go right ahead. Oh, maybe that was digital distortion, I guess. My bad. Let's go inside the Senate chamber right now. And a tight race, Lenny Seo taking on Senator Dominic Ruggiero, the president of the Senate here in Rhode Island. And at this point, again, we don't know the mail ballots. By the time this airs, we likely will, and we'll have. But as of this moment, it's Lenny is trailing. But let's talk about the pressure, and when you look at Sam Bell and sort of a mandate of what he's been able to accomplish inside the Senate. Tara, what would you say in that chamber is going to happen, so to speak, next year? Do you feel that there's going to be a renewed sense of responsibility for leadership to acknowledge the progressive wing? And do you feel that there's going to be a new pathway for some of the progressive ideas that are, and frankly, just fair ideas that have come forth that have oftentimes been repressed by leadership?
Yeah, I think when we announced as part of the political co-op, our goal was to literally flip the power dynamics of the Senate. That's what we set out to do, whether or not they listened to us when we announced that 13 months ago. That is their fault for not listening. We are a strong force of people who will be going. I can only speak on the Senate side, but I'm excited about the friends and allies and the policy that we're already bringing into that space and the commitments we've made to the people of Rhode Island through our shared platform as Rhode Island Political Co-op. And I don't think leadership can ignore that. We made a bold statement 13 months ago that we were going to fight together for going against the status quo, and that's exactly what we aim to do. And there are fingers crossed, a couple numbers still pending, but we're going to have a lot of solid representation from this group, and our demands, it's going to be hard to ignore us, and it's going to be hard to ignore the fact that Rhode Island is paying attention to progressive voices, progressive issues, and this idea that we can literally shift and change policies when we have new and strong voices in those positions.
Brandon, how much did you hear from people who were not necessarily progressive in their ideology, but wanted to just shift the power dynamics? I just checked the other day. It was October 18th of last year when Jeff Britt was indicted. I happened to be filling in on WPRO for Dan York that day, and I had Matt Brown on as well as Sue Cienki. And it was an interesting conversation because, yeah, there's obviously vastly different political and worldviews there, but there's one common thread, which is that, look, we need to shake up the way things are done. Did you encounter folks like that who maybe said, look, I'm a little hesitant for whatever reason to, I don't know if it's the tax structure or any other particular policy, but change in the state was something that was front and center for them? Yeah,
that's exactly it. The word progressive, while I definitely identify with it and it encapsulates, the philosophy that we share at the co-op, that wasn't a common talking point, and that wasn't coming from voters on the doors. They weren't asking me, are you a progressive? Are you a liberal? What I really came to find is that people are really not concerned with the political labels. They're not concerned even with partisanship, right? They just want accountability, and they want to know that people in government are going to actually fight for them. They understand that there's this sense of the good old boy network and people that are well connected and have this special influence, and how they're the ones that are being neglected. So people really weren't bent on where you fell on the political spectrum. I think it was really just about making the connection with people, letting them know that, hey, we do have a choice. We can elect people locally that are actually going to go and fight for not just political labels, but for policies that are actually going to help regular people in the community. And making that connection, just, meeting people with just real stories that you can relate to. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I had from campaigning door to door. It transcends politics. It's really just about accountability. I mean, I had plenty of people that were willing to identify as conservatives and didn't exactly agree with me on particular policy issues, but told me that they were going to vote for me just for the accountability issue and knowing that I was someone that was genuine and wanted to fight for regular people in the community. And I think really that's what progressive, quote unquote, progressive politics is really about, right? It's about representing the things that actually are going to benefit people.
That's fascinating. It really is. And I think that that's a common thread here in Rhode Island that is going to have to be played into more and more, because there are people in the state that lean right, that or are in some cases to the far right, but they just are done with the system at play and feel like they're not represented. You know, whether or not you agree with those positions, you can certainly empathize with someone who feels like they're on the outside looking in. Discover over 200 episodes of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast, on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your pods. Or head over to our website, ripodcast.com. I'm curious, Jeanine, what you, in this being your third run, what was most different about this? And I'm curious about the Rhode Island Political Co-op as a unit. It's not a political party. It sort of like takes the idea of the Reform Caucus, but puts it into the hands of candidates as well and allies. Just sort of a grouping, but there's also obviously mechanical things that worked, that allowed candidates to work together and in some cases pool resources. What was it like for you this go around?
Yeah, so the co-op definitely had an impact on my race. The whole goal of why we started the co-op in the first place was because we know the establishment has a very well-oiled machine, and they use that to keep keep themselves in office and, to really put down anybody who challenges them. So the goal was to build our own machine, our own network, our own, way to train candidates and campaign managers and staff and volunteers, and to really, just get them fired up to go out and fight for our candidates. So for me personally, bringing on and networking with groups like Sunrise, the amount of people to come out and canvass, knock doors or make phone calls, like all of that was exponentially greater than it has ever been in the past. And I think it's going to have a really big impact because, especially every person that you connect with, they can go out and connect with 3 other people and tell them how great your candidate is. So obviously that's going to be a huge factor. And then I think in terms of, what Tiara and Brandon were saying, there's so many people that we talk to that are just tired of not being represented, right? They, if you ask them, are you better off today than you were 10 years ago? A lot of people are going to say no. And they're going to look at the establishment and the people who are in office and blame them. So I think there's a lot of people, regardless if you're a conservative or a progressive, that are just going to look, I just want change. I want somebody who's really going to represent me and not special interest. We don't take money from corporate lobbyists. We don't take money from the fossil fuel industry. So we're saying that we're going to represent the people and not these, people who are funding us.
Yeah, fascinating stuff right there. I'm curious, each of you, we'll kind of run through the gauntlet here. We'll mix up the order for this go around of questions. Why not? So we'll stay with you, Jeanine. What's your number one policy goal? You know what I mean? What stands out for you?
Narrowing it down to one is tough.
Impossible sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think my number one of the reasons I got involved with the Bernie Sanders campaign back in 2015 was income inequality. So many people are struggling. Like, it's heartbreaking sometimes when you talk to like a mom who's working 2 or 3 jobs, and still having a hard time putting food on the table. That's not right. When I was growing up, you were told, work hard, get an education or some kind of training, and you can do better than your parents. That's not the case anymore. And so that really is like really important to me. Again, the environment, healthcare, those are like my top 3.
Brandon?
Yeah, same thing what Jeanine was saying. It's just so hard to narrow it down to one issue. And I got that question a lot on the doors too. And I would tell people in a very long-winded way that I had to be genuine and say I can't boil it down to one issue. But if I had to just take one piece of legislation that I'm optimistic that we can get passed, it would be single payer healthcare.
Tiara?
Yeah, hardest question to answer. COVID-19 has proven that our system has so many areas that are not prepared for people's lives, especially in the midst of this pandemic. Housing is a very close issue to me. COVID-19 has also highlighted that we need to have a better, more just housing system, which ties into income inequality. As an educator focusing on education, COVID-19 has also impacted access to education for so many families. We're also in the middle of a climate crisis. We see our entire West Coast is on fire right now. So it's really hard to narrow it down to one issue. And I think that's what's so great about progressives, because it is not just one issue. When we fight for justice, we're fighting for income equality. We are fighting for fair housing. We're fighting for healthcare. We're fighting for quality education. We're fighting for opportunities for each and every person. And that's going to be indicative in every single policy, no matter if it has the title of housing. It's going to impact everyone equally. And I think that's what's really exciting about the progressive movement, because it says there is no single issue that isn't separate from the others.
Let's imagine that for just a moment, that there's a miracle happens and all of a sudden COVID-19, we wake up tomorrow and there's somehow an update on everyone's iPhone app that makes the pandemic end, let's say. And let's say there's an elevator somewhere, like they fixed the elevator at the State House right before the break, the COVID-19 break. Let's go down. Let's start with Brandon. You get in the elevator and ding, there's Mike Chippendale. What are you going to talk about as that elevator goes upstairs? Where can you collaborate? What common ground can you find?
Wow, that's an interesting question. And answering it off the cuff, I have to tell you, it actually brings me back to one of the really impactful statements that my opponent and current rep had made when he first got elected about the need to work with Republicans, right? And I'm definitely not one to get hyper partisan, and I don't want anyone to take it as we want to squeeze people out and not acknowledge them, right? But when you have an overwhelming Democrat majority and then you have 9 Republicans in the House, that shouldn't be the priority for any Democrat elected, to find common ground there, okay? The people's voice is obviously reflected in Democrat values by electing Democrats, so we should really focus on those issues and how we move them forward, right? I think by and large, a lot of the so-called compromise that Democrats make to be bipartisan is really kind of veiled and disguised as something other than just genuine compromise. I think it just kind of shows that the political establishment, no matter what party, by and large, a lot of times has the same interest. And it goes back to what we're talking about whether those policies are going to benefit people or they're going to benefit corporate lobbyists. Now, I actually think that there's a role for the traditional Republican platform in Rhode Island, especially when you pair it against what the Democrat Party here has become, right? I don't think that it's, really a coincidence where you would see some of the progressives elected being able to work with the Republicans in the House or finding common ground on the votes that they take, right? And I think that kind of goes just back to integrity. But at the same time, you want to acknowledge that, but also not let it overshadow why you were elected, the messaging that you said to people and the promises that you made for them. So my approach is, I'm not looking to make enemies with anybody, and I'm also not really looking to make friends. I'm looking to go and represent the people that hopefully have elected me and really fight for those policies that benefit those people. And however the personal relationships in the State House pan out, they pan out. But that's not my priority at all.
Tiara, let's say, imagine people actually take cabs in Providence and all of a sudden it's like wind, rain, it's just a disaster. And you're trying to jump in a cab and one pulls up and you get in, all right, this is great. I'm out of the rain. Awesome. And you look over there and then smiling, potentially smoking a cigar is President Ruggiero. you're in a cab now for the next 3 to 5 minutes. What do you talk about?
Justice and liberation for the people. Honestly, I think that any conversation with elected officials that does not center around justice and liberation for the people through people-centered policies is a wasted conversation. Our job is to move the needle where it hasn't been moved before. Our job is to literally shift the conversations and how we have people-centered conversations about our policy, bringing our own experience, bringing the stories from the ground. We knocked on so many doors, not because we wanted to win, but because we wanted to hear what people wanted when we got into office. And those are the stories that I want to be able to share to leaders who have not been able to knock doors, or who have chosen not to knock doors, or people who have not had conversations with real people on the ground. And that's what I hope to share always. And every conversation will center around how are we going to serve, how are we going to lead for justice and liberation for every single person in Rhode Island.
And I'll ask the same question to you, Jeanine. Let's say, I don't know, like, let's say like a moderate, like Stephen Archambault, you bump into him and somehow you're trying to find common ground on policy, or not even common ground, but just what do you address, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. So I think that, there's the personal and then there's the policy, right? So you may not agree with everybody on policy, but, they're still people. You could still talk to them and say hello. The thing is, even from when I was up there before, there were, the Republicans sometimes come out with really good government bills, so to just say that you're going to not read the bill or, just because it was introduced by a Republican is probably not very good thinking. But, we do have a certain set of policy goals that we want to, try to push through. And we're not weak tea candidates, or we're not, looking to water them down, which is typically what happens. The time for incrementalism is over. We don't have the luxury of waiting 20 years to do something about the climate. People are struggling right now, and to not give them a living wage right now is wrong. So we have to push for the things that we believe in. We can be cordial and nice they're just people too. So, but, don't expect that there isn't something that might come up that you agree on just because, it comes from the other side, if you will.
All right. Last couple of seconds here. Where again, we're waiting in terms of real time. We're waiting for the final results. It does seem pretty clear where things will sit. I understand that there's, you're not necessarily going to spike a football right now. It's not quite there, but assuming things hold up, if we could go through each of you, what will day one look like? And I know that's similar to a previous question, but just what will day one look like? And we'll start with Tiara.
Yeah, day one. That's a loaded question. Again, COVID-19 has thrown so much at us. We have so many issues that we need to face. But I think, like Jeanine said, we need a livable wage now. We need housing security for all right now. And we need a single payer health care for everyone right now. I think it would be a missed opportunity if we did not go in on our best horses, fastest horses. There's an expression, I can't think of it right now, but if we don't go in on our fastest horses with our shiniest silver, saying this is what we are here for.
Yeah. Understood. Jeanine?
Day one to me means new leadership. It also means that new rules. The rules are broken in both the House and the Senate. They were made worse last year. No one person should have power, that amount of power, to be able to decide what comes up for a vote and what doesn't, and control the committees. Yep. So that to me is going to be the main focus immediately. And
Brandon?
Yeah, so Jeanine has a much better insight than I do because she has the experience there, right? But my attitude is, my first day, I want to treat like my last day, and every day there, right? I want to roll my sleeves up and I want to go to work. And I think that we have to always remember and acknowledge that there are so many serious issues that are going to take real work to get done. And it's just about work ethic to me, where I'm not, entirely sure what to expect on any given day, but I know that my commitment is to work as hard as that I can to get some real policy, real legislation passed that's going to help people.
Extremely impressive work by the Rhode Island Political Co-op, and as we said, an asterisk-laden congrats to all of you at this point in time, so to speak, for just, again, broadly on the state, at minimum on the statewide basis, the co-op has emerged in a way that I think many commentators and politicos here in Rhode Island weren't expecting. And I'm judging that based on standing around in the parking lot of the Providence water supply at 8:30 at night and having conversations off the record and things like that, where it's like, okay, hard, it is one of the most tired expressions, probably more so than even the horse expression, but hard work pays off, and you put the work in to get your message out, and it's resonated with voters. So I commend the co-op broadly for that, very much so.
Thanks. We are all the co-op. The co-op is the candidates, and we build the policy together, and we're going to work together into the future. This doesn't stop after the election. We're all going to work together on passing really good policy.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey, as always, thanks for tuning in to the Bartholomew Town Podcast, your election central right here in Rhode Island. We'll have tons of coverage as we make our way towards the general election on November 3rd, local, state, and presidential. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening right now. And until next time, I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.